Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
On October 30, 2025, a very important meeting took place in Busan, South Korea. Two powerful leaders met there: United States President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. They had not seen each other face to face for 6 years. Many people around the world paid close attention to this meeting, wondering what would happen. This discussion was extremely important because the global economy was in big trouble. The United States and China are the two largest economies in the world. Together, they create almost half of all goods made globally. When these two big economies have problems, the whole world feels it. For many months before this meeting, these two countries were in what people called a trade war. A trade war happens when countries put very high taxes, known as tariffs, on each other's goods. For example, some tariffs on Chinese goods reached 145%. China also put high tariffs on American goods, up to 125%. These high tariffs made products more expensive for everyone. They made it difficult for businesses to buy and sell things, causing chaos in supply chains. Supply chains are how goods move from where they are made to where they are sold. This situation caused problems for many companies and workers in industries from cars to computer chips around the world. The global economy felt like it was standing very close to a dangerous edge, a big crisis. The future of many jobs and businesses depended on this meeting. After about 100 minutes of talking, President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping shook hands. They announced some important agreements. One main result was a small reduction in the tariffs. President Donald Trump said that the United States would lower its tariffs on Chinese goods by 10%. This means the taxes on these goods went down from 57% to 47%. This was a clear sign that both sides wanted to slow down the trade war. China also agreed to some things in this deal. They promised to buy American farm products again, like soybeans. This was good news for farmers in the United States who had lost many sales. The two countries also said they would work together to stop the flow of a dangerous drug called fentanyl, which caused many problems in the United States. These agreements did not solve all the big, difficult problems between the two nations. Important disagreements about how their economies work were still there. But they offered a temporary break from the escalating trade war. The world's financial markets, which had been very worried for months, felt a sense of relief. It was a step back from the immediate danger of a major economic crisis. President Trump said the meeting was a great success, calling it a 12 on a scale of 0 to 10. This temporary peace gave many people and businesses a chance to breathe and hope for a better future, even if the biggest issues were still there to be solved later. 2. The path to the meeting. The path to the important meeting in Busan was long and difficult. The trade conflict between the United States and China did not start in 2025. It began much earlier. In 2018, during his first term, President Donald Trump started placing extra taxes, called tariffs, on goods from China. His goal was to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and address what he called unfair Chinese trade practices, like stealing ideas or forced technology transfers. However, by the end of President Trump's first time in office, many reports said the trade war had failed its objectives. American shoppers and businesses often paid more because of these tariffs. Later, a different U.S. administration kept these tariffs and added new ones on specific Chinese goods, like electric vehicles. The situation got much worse in 2025. When Donald Trump became president again in January 2025, he quickly escalated the conflict to levels never seen before. On February 1, he signed an order declaring a national emergency over drug trafficking from China. He then imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, aiming to pressure Beijing on the fentanyl crisis. This was just the start. In March, tariffs increased to 20%. Then, on April 2, President Trump announced an additional 34% tariff, bringing the total to 54% on some goods. He cited China's own 67% trade barriers. In total, some Chinese goods faced tariffs as high as 145%. China did not stay quiet. When President Trump raised his tariffs, China responded with its own tariffs of 125% on American goods. But China also used a powerful and strategic tool: rare earth elements. These are special materials vital for many modern technologies, such as mobile phones, electric cars, military systems, and computer chips. China controls about 60% of global rare earth mining and almost 90% of its processing, giving China enormous power in trade talks. In April 2025, China announced restrictions on rare earth exports. This caused big worries for industries worldwide. The situation became even more serious in October. China declared it would greatly expand these restrictions, adding 5 new elements and tougher licensing rules. This threatened global supply chains. President Trump reacted strongly, threatening an additional 100% tariff, and briefly considered canceling the meeting with President Xi Jinping. Because the world's economy was so close to a complete breakdown, officials from both sides worked urgently. Negotiators from the U.S., led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and their Chinese counterparts, met in Malaysia in late October. They worked frantically to create agreements that could prevent economic disaster, hammering out preliminary deals on rare earths, American soybeans, and the fentanyl drug problem during these last-minute discussions. These 3 issues became the main focus for President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping at their high-stakes meeting in Busan, South Korea. 3. What they agreed on. The meeting between President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping in Busan led to several important agreements. These agreements were aimed at reducing the trade conflict that had caused problems for the world economy. For a short time, these deals brought some relief to markets and businesses. One major agreement was about rare earth elements. China agreed to a deal to continue selling these important materials for 1 year. Rare earths are key for making many modern products, such as smartphones, electric vehicles, and important parts for military defense. President Donald Trump announced that the issue of rare earths was settled for the world. This deal stopped China from putting new controls on these exports, which was planned for November. This gave important industries, like those making F-35 fighter jets or advanced electronics, a year to breathe. However, this was a temporary fix. China still holds great power in processing rare earths, doing 92% of the refining and 98% of magnet making. Creating other sources will take many years and a lot of money. China also agreed to buy American farm products again. This was especially good news for soybean farmers in the United States. Many farmers in important American states had been badly hurt when China stopped buying their soybeans. Since January 2025, American farm exports to China had dropped by over $6.8 billion, a decrease of more than 73%. Before the trade war in 2018, almost 60% of all U.S. soybean exports went to China. The loss of this large market caused serious economic trouble for many farmers. The new agreement brought instant help. But some experts warned that the damage might be long-lasting. During the time China did not buy from the U.S., countries like Brazil and Argentina sold more soybeans to China. This could mean the U.S. will not get back all its lost market share. Another important point was a promise to work together on the fentanyl drug problem. Fentanyl is a powerful and dangerous opioid that causes many deaths among Americans, especially those aged 18 to 45. China is the main source of the special chemicals used to make fentanyl. Most of the finished drug is then made in Mexico and moved into the United States. As a sign of cooperation, the U.S. reduced some tariffs related to fentanyl from 20% to 10%. China had already started some new rules in 2024 to control these chemicals. U.S. officials had noted that these actions were helping to reduce the flow of fentanyl by October 2024. The United States also lowered its tariffs on many Chinese goods. President Donald Trump announced a 10% cut. The tariffs went down from 57% to 47%. This was a real and clear step to ease the economic fight that had been going on for months. While the tariffs were still higher than before the trade war began, this reduction showed that both countries wanted to de-escalate the situation and reduce the pressure on global trade. Finally, a solution was found for the popular social media app TikTok. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that the TikTok issue would be finalized during the summit. This was good news for the 170 million Americans who use the app. TikTok had been a big problem because of worries about data security and national sovereignty. While specific details were not immediately shared, this agreement meant that a thorny technology issue between the two nations was put to rest, at least for now. 4. What they did not talk about. The meeting in Busan brought some good news, but it did not solve all the problems between the United States and China. Many big issues were not talked about at all. These issues are very important for the future of both countries and the world. The agreement was more about stopping an immediate crisis than fixing the deep problems that led to the trade conflict. One very important topic that was not discussed was Taiwan. President Donald Trump later said that he did not talk about Taiwan with President Xi. This brought worry to officials in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, who thought the island might become part of a trade deal. Taiwan is an island that China says belongs to it. China has not said it will not use force to take Taiwan back. Before the meeting, China even did military drills with H-6K bombers near Taiwan. This was a strong reminder of the military tension under the economic talks. Trump's words about Taiwan had sometimes been unclear, causing more concern among allies. U.S. officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio tried to reassure Taiwan that the U.S. would still support them. However, the fact that Taiwan was not discussed means this big, dangerous problem is still there, without a clear path forward. Also, the main reasons for the economic fight were not fixed. The United States has long complained about how China runs its economy. These complaints include China's government helping its own companies too much with money, and taking new ideas or technology from other countries without permission. These problems were the first reasons for the trade war, which started many years ago. But the Busan deal did not change any of these deep issues. The U.S. believes China's way of doing business creates big problems for fair world trade. China, however, thinks its system works well and helps provide useful goods to the world at competitive prices. So, this basic disagreement about how economies should work still exists between the two superpowers. The competition for new technology also continues strongly. Both the U.S. and China are trying to be the best in important new areas like computer chips, artificial intelligence, and advanced electronics. The U.S. has rules to stop China from getting important advanced computer chips and the machines needed to make them. These rules started even before President Trump returned to office, and his government has kept them. This fight is not just about trade money, but about who has the best technology for national safety and power. China is trying very hard to make its own technology so it does not need help from other countries. China is trying very hard to make its own technology so it does not need help from other countries. The meeting did not change these technology rules or this important competition between the two nations. Finally, the problem of depending on China for important materials is not solved for the long term. For example, China is very important for rare earth materials. These special materials are used in many essential things, from smartphones and electric cars to advanced military jets and precision-guided missiles. The deal only said China would sell rare earths for 1 year. This was a very temporary fix. It did not create a long-term way for the U.S. and other countries to get these materials without relying so much on China. Building new factories to process rare earths and finding new places to mine them will take many years and billions of dollars. So, the world still depends heavily on China for these key materials, and that makes the U.S. vulnerable. The Busan meeting helped calm things down for a short time, but it left many big, difficult problems for the future. These are the things that President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping did not talk about, and they could easily cause new tensions later. The truce was fragile. 5. A big surprise. Just before his important meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Donald Trump made a very surprising announcement. Hours before they met in Busan, South Korea, President Trump declared that the United States would start testing nuclear weapons again. He ordered the Pentagon to begin these tests immediately, marking a big change in the country's policy. This decision was a significant shift for the United States. For more than 30 years, the U.S. had not conducted a full nuclear weapons test. The last one took place in 1992 under President George H.W. Bush, who had announced a stop to such tests. The news shocked many people and governments around the world. President Trump explained his choice by mentioning testing programs from other nations. He spoke about Russia and China's activities, even though only North Korea had actually detonated nuclear devices since 1998. This announcement also came shortly after Russian President Vladimir Putin revealed a successful test of Russia's new Poseidon super torpedo. This weapon, powered by nuclear energy, is designed to create large radioactive waves that could damage coastal areas. The timing of President Trump's announcement was very striking. By ordering the restart of nuclear tests just before sitting down with President Xi, it seemed to be a bold show of strength. It appeared designed to project power and make a strong statement before the high-level talks. Despite the global impact of this news, President Trump did not answer any questions from journalists about the nuclear testing order during the actual meeting in Busan. This move raised serious questions about global arms control. It created a risk of a new global arms race, where more countries might feel a need to develop and test their own nuclear weapons. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, signed by the United States in 1996, was a decades-long international effort to prevent the spread and development of nuclear weapons. President Trump's announcement threatened to unravel this fragile agreement and the international cooperation it represented. It remained unclear exactly what testing would involve, whether it meant actual nuclear explosions or more limited tests using computer simulations. Brandon Williams, the head of the National Nuclear Security Administration, had previously advised against restarting nuclear weapons tests. The Pentagon and the Department of Energy did not release clear statements right after President Trump's announcement. This unexpected decision added a layer of tension and uncertainty to the already critical summit in Busan. 6. Talking about the war. During the meeting in Busan, President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping also talked about the war in Ukraine. President Trump said they discussed the war for a long time. They agreed to try and work together to find a solution to the conflict. President Trump had often expressed his frustration with the slow progress in ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He had made campaign promises to quickly resolve the conflict. Earlier, a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in August did not lead to a breakthrough. This led President Trump to put new economic penalties on Russia's biggest oil companies. Now, President Trump hoped that President Xi could use his strong influence with President Putin to help start peace talks. On his flight to South Korea, President Trump stated, "I'd like China to help us with Russia." However, this hope was very optimistic and faced many difficulties. China is Russia's main ally and has been important in helping Moscow deal with economic penalties from Western countries. China has bought large amounts of Russian oil. It has also given Russia materials that can be used for both normal daily life and military purposes. China and Russia have called their partnership a friendship without limits. Both President Xi and President Putin met in Beijing in September 2025. There, they publicly restated their very strong relationship. Beijing has consistently avoided criticizing Russia's invasion. The United States and its allies have accused China of supporting Russia's military actions, but China denies these claims. The idea that China would truly pressure Russia to end the war, especially on terms that would be good for Ukraine and the West, seemed very unlikely. China gains strategically from the United States focusing its attention on Europe instead of Asia. Also, Beijing has used Russia's international isolation to get better deals on energy imports. Some officials from European nations believe that China is supporting Russia's war specifically to keep America busy. They think this distracts America from the competition in the Indo-Pacific region. Because of China's strong and lasting friendship with Russia and the benefits it gets, it was very difficult to imagine China putting real pressure on its ally. The discussion about Ukraine was important, but it faced a very big challenge due to China's deep ties to Russia. 7. Why the meeting was important. The meeting in Busan was important for the whole world, not just for the United States and China. What President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping decided there affected many countries and how the global economy works. It showed how deeply connected these two big nations are, even when they act as rivals. For many years, the United States and China have been great economic partners. They trade a lot of goods and services. For example, in 2024, they traded about $585 billion. American companies need things made in China, and China needs to sell its products and use American technology. This means their economies are tied together. However, at the same time, they are also strong rivals. They compete to have the best new technology, like computer chips. They also compete for military power, especially in places like the Indo-Pacific. And they both want to be very influential in the world. This situation creates a difficult balance. Can they be partners in trade and rivals for power at the same time? The Busan meeting showed they both knew breaking all ties would be very bad for everyone, but it did not give a clear answer for how they will live together in the long term. The trade war between the two giants had a big effect on other countries too. Some nations, like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Mexico, saw changes in their trade. Some companies moved their factories to these countries to avoid the tariffs that the U.S. and China put on each other's goods. This brought new jobs and money to these places. But these same countries also felt pressure to choose a side. Many nations in Southeast Asia, for example, rely on China for their supply chains and trade. At the same time, they depend on the United States for safety and military help, especially with problems in the South China Sea. President Trump also made deals with countries like Australia and Japan for rare earth materials. These deals aimed to help other countries not rely only on China for these important materials. But such actions could also divide regions, making countries choose who to work with based on politics, not just business. The trade war also challenged the world system of trade rules. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, is a global group that helps countries trade fairly. But the U.S. and China often did not follow WTO rules during the trade war. President Trump, for example, put tariffs on Chinese goods by saying it was a national emergency. This was not the usual way of doing things through the WTO. China also sometimes made its own rules. This way of acting by big countries can weaken the global rules that have helped trade for many years. The WTO has even warned that if the world splits into two big economic groups, one led by the U.S. and one by China, it could make the global economy 7% smaller over time. This shows how important it is for countries to work together under clear rules. Finally, the trade war had a clear effect on world markets and economic growth. All through 2025, markets were very unstable. Businesses did not know what would happen next, so they stopped making new investments. Supply chains, which are like long roads from factories to shops, were broken or changed. This cost a lot of money and caused delays. The International Monetary Fund, a group that watches the world economy, said that the first trade war from 2018 to 2019 made global economic growth slower by 0.8%. This shows how important it is for countries to work together under clear rules. Finally, the trade war had a clear effect on world markets and economic growth. All through 2025, markets were very unstable. Businesses did not know what would happen next, so they stopped making new investments. Supply chains, which are like long roads for goods from factories to shops, were broken or changed. This cost a lot of money and caused delays. The International Monetary Fund, a group that watches the world economy, said that the first trade war from 2018 to 2019 made global economic growth slower by 0.8%. The tariffs in 2025 were much higher, so the harm to the economy could have been even worse. The Busan Agreement brought some relief to markets. People hoped for more stability. But because many parts of the deal were only for 1 year, everyone knew that uncertainty and problems could come back soon. The meeting was important because it gave the world a short break from a very dangerous economic situation, but it did not solve the main problems. 8. What happens next? The Busan meeting helped calm things down. It stopped a big economic fight from getting worse. But this meeting did not solve the main problems between the United States and China. The agreements made were mostly for a short time, not for the long future. Both leaders needed a success. President Donald Trump faced pressure at home from suffering farmers and rising prices. He wanted to show he could make a good deal. President Xi Jinping also faced challenges with China's economy growing slowly and problems in its housing market. He needed stability. So, the meeting served both leaders' political needs, letting them claim victory. The deals they made showed this short-term thinking. For example, the agreement about rare earth materials was only for 1 year. These materials are very important for making things like phones, electric cars, and military equipment. China controls most of these materials. The 1-year deal gives the world time, but it means the same problem will come back next year. The U.S. hopes to find new ways to get rare earths, but this will take many years and a lot of money. Also, China agreed to buy American soybeans again. This helped American farmers who had lost a big market. But during the time China stopped buying, other countries like Brazil and Argentina started selling more soybeans. So, even with the New Deal, U.S. farmers might not get all their old business back. The damage could be lasting. Many big problems were not even talked about in Busan. Taiwan, an island that China says belongs to it, was not discussed. This is a very sensitive issue that could easily cause trouble between the two countries. The main reasons for the trade war, like China's way of doing business and its help for its own industries, were not fixed. The competition for new technology, such as computer chips and artificial intelligence, also continues strongly. Both countries want to be the best in these areas, and this fight is still going on. The U.S. still worries about depending on China for important goods. They are trying to find other suppliers, but it is a slow process. The meeting showed that personal talks between leaders have limits. President Trump often talked about his good relationship with President Xi. But even with good feelings, the big issues between their countries usually stay the same because their national goals are different. Past deals between them also did not last long. One strange thing before the meeting was President Trump's order to start testing nuclear weapons again. This was a big change after more than 30 years. It seemed like a way to show strength, but it also raises worries about a new race to build more weapons in the world. This topic was not talked about during the meeting itself, which makes its purpose unclear. The leaders also spoke about the war in Ukraine, but not much changed. President Trump hoped China could help bring peace with Russia. But China is a strong friend of Russia and helps it a lot. China might not want to pressure Russia as it benefits from the U.S. being busy with problems in Europe. So the peace from the Busan summit is very weak. The two countries are connected by trade, but they are also rivals. This balance is hard to keep. Other countries in the world are watching closely. They often feel caught between the U.S. and China. The global rules for trade are also under stress because of this competition. The next year will be important. The one-year deals will end, and new talks will be needed. The deeper problems between the U.S. and China, like who will lead in technology and security, are still there. These problems could lead to more conflict. The meeting in Busan gave everyone a small break, a short time to breathe. But it did not remove the clouds from the sky. The future of the relationship between the two most powerful economies in the world is still very unclear. It is like they pressed a pause button, but the game has not ended. The real test will not be now, but in the months to come. Both sides will continue to work for their own goals, testing what they agreed on. History tells us that peace between big powers is rarely forever. Economic ties do not always stop big disagreements. The 100 minutes in Busan were important for everyone, but they brought only a temporary calm. Will the United States and China find a lasting way to work together? Or will their differences lead to more problems in the coming year? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.